Thank you. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Thank you, John, for a great introduction. You gave me more credit than I deserve. The Joint Information Bureau in Dhahran was set up by a number of officials from the Ministry of Information as well as from the embassy, and I personally was one of the junior people in the effort. So while I appreciate the credit, I certainly don't deserve it. But in any case, thank you for the very kind words, and allow me to express my appreciation to the National Council for hosting this very important conference once again. The subject matter of my talk is an ambassador's view from Washington. That's a fairly tall order. There are many, many views in Washington and many, many ambassadors in Washington. So I will talk about a little bit about the history of our bilateral relationship, the challenges that they face, the state of our relationship today, and the steps that the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia has taken and continues to take in order to bring our world closer together. And then I would be happy to take questions. Hopefully I will have a little bit more time for you than my colleague, Ambassador Crocker. The relationship between our two countries is now in its 7th decade. In the 1930s, when your Army Corps of Engineers was building the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco, your business community built an 8,000-mile bridge to Saudi Arabia. Americans came, they discovered oil, they put down roots among us, and they launched what was to become a very important relationship to both countries as well as to the world. The relationship took on a political dimension when the late King Abdulaziz met with the late President Franklin Roosevelt on the USS Quincy in the Great Bitter Lake in Egypt in 1945 at the end of World War II. That cemented the diplomatic aspect of the relationship. And then, of course, the military relationship began in the early 1950s when the US started its first military training mission to Saudi Arabia. And over the past 7 decades, our relationship has seen the coming and breaking of many storms. We have dealt jointly and effectively in facing the challenges to our respective nations as well as to the region. And with every decade and with every experience, our relationship has come out stronger than it was before. And if you allow me to very quickly go through some of the history of that relationship, because people tend to forget or not put things in their proper context. In the 1950s and 60s, when it was not fashionable to be America's friend, Saudi Arabia was. In the 1950s and 60s, when our region was consumed by radicalism, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and the United States were able to confront that radicalism and, in fact, prevail over it. In the 1970s and 80s, when the Soviet Union was on a rampage, expanding its influence or seeking to expand its influence in Central Asia, in the Horn of Africa, even in the Middle East, it was Saudi Arabia that was one of the key countries in preventing a Soviet takeover of the region. Of course, we all remember the joint effort between the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and the United States in the 1980s in support of the Mujahideen in Afghanistan, which led to their defeat of the Soviet Union, the withdrawal of the Soviet Union from Afghanistan, and subsequent to that, the collapse of the Soviet Union as a communist state. The relationship was again tested and came out with flying colors in 1990-91 when Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait, and when our two countries put together a coalition of over 32 countries to liberate Kuwait and restore its legitimate government. Of course, then our next big challenge was the tragic effects and criminal effects of 9/11. When we discovered that 15 of the 19 hijackers hailed from Saudi Arabia, it was devastating to us. It was a big blow potentially to the relationship. It cast doubts in the minds of Americans about Saudi Arabia. It unleashed a tremendously critical and negative portrayal of Saudi Arabia in the United States and in the rest of the world. We in the Kingdom dealt with this issue. We examined the threat that we faced. We confronted it head on, and we came out of this experience, we meaning the United States and Saudi Arabia, in a much healthier and much stronger relationship than we were before these events. Today, when I look at our relationship, I like to quote, as I always do, but that doesn't mean that I agree with the political philosophy, but Ronald Reagan, he used to say that facts are stubborn things. And when we look at the facts of the relationship between our two countries today versus where they were even as recently as 10 years ago, I think the numbers are staggering. Today, as we speak, we have over 30,000 students, Saudi students, studying at American colleges and universities. This is an all-time high number. We have never had that many students studying in the United States. They will come back and they will be advocates of the bilateral relationship. They will be ambassadors for the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia while they're here, and they will be ambassadors for the United States when they go back. This is a very important and strategic step and decision that was made by the custodian of the two holy mosques after his meeting with President Bush in Crawford in 2005. To put the number in perspective, 5 years ago, the number of students, or in 2003, the number of students in the United States did not exceed 3,000. So we have 10 times as many students today as we had back then. Another example is the travel between our respective countries. The number of visas that the American embassy and consulates issued in Saudi Arabia last year to Saudi citizens was about 70,000. That is an all-time high number. And the number of visas that our embassy and consulates in the United States issued to Americans is about 65,000. That also is an all-time high number. When I look at investments between the two countries, they're at record numbers. We are on track to double the investment, that American investment in Saudi Arabia over a 60-year period in a matter of 5 years, if we exclude the investments in Aramco. I can cite a joint venture between Aramco and Dow Chemicals that will amount to over $20 billion. Alcoa is doing a joint venture with Ma'aden to produce one of the biggest aluminum smelter complexes in the world at a value of over $14 billion, and the list goes on. So when I look at the numbers and the facts, I see a very healthy and robust relationship. When I look at the interaction between our two governments, we have worked very hard, both of us, over the last 6 or 7 years to institutionalize our relationship, to build bridges directly between different agencies of our government so that they can handle problems at a working level rather than have each problem grow and literally grow out of context. We were able to deal with consular matters that involve visas and duration of visas and child custody cases. We were able to deal with commercial issues like commercial disputes between companies. We put them in channels where they can be dealt with at the working level rather than turning them into political problems. We have a very close cooperation in the field of counterterrorism and terror finance. We have programs for critical infrastructure protection. We have programs for exchanging information on identifying radicalism and extremism and ways of dealing with it. I believe, and these issues have helped to solidify and cement a very strong and very important relationship.